Which RED camera is the best to buy in 2026?
Siehst du den Schweinekopf da? Ja. Du kniest dich jetzt ein und beißt in die Kante vom Schweineton.
Most of these cameras have dropped in price massively, so we will go over all the RED sensors that RED ever has been made and to choose whether or not which camera is the right investment for you or not. Hi guys, my name is Paul. I'm a German-based cinematographer and this channel is all about filmmaking, gear reviews, but also DaVinci Resolve tutorials. So if it's something that you're interested in, consider subscribe. That really helps the channel. Thank you. So I've been shooting on RED cameras since 2018 and I've shot basically on every RED camera excluding the RED Mysterium X and the RED Mysterium. Starting with the RED Mysterium X, which is basically a 5K sensor shooting up to 120 frames per second in the full format. Speaking of format, all these cameras, or most of them, are Super 35, but as you know, Super 35 usually means around a 1.5x crop. That's usually not the case with RED. They are all a little bit bigger, so somewhat closer to full frame. So the RED Mysterium X has a 1.3x crop compared to full frame, and it has around 13 stops of dynamic range. That's also what RED is stating. And you can pick those cameras up easily for $1,000 or $2,000 something. What many people love about the Mysterium X is that it has still like a kind of filmic look if you want to. And that's also the same case with the Dragon sensor. Dragon was first introduced when DSMC, the DSMC, and then also carried over to DSMC2. This one here is the last model to have the Dragon sensor in it, which is the Dragon X. Mine is from 2019. And from that route on, RED went more into kind of a neutral sensor design, if you want to call it. So the RED Dragon is one of RED's most famous sensors ever made. It shoots 6K up to 82 frames per second in its full format, and this one has a 1.15x crop, so very close to full frame in 16:9. So personally, if you ask me, the Dragon sensor is the best sensor RED ever made, and also the look and the organic feeling of this sensor is just, for me, unmatched. And if you're going for the RED Dragon, you can pick one up. I mean, depending on the condition and everything, if you go for the DSMC model, I think you can go get it around like 2,000 or 3,000 maybe. Here on DSMC2, you can get it up to like 5 to 6 grand. So also vastly depends on where you get it from. I got mine with only 150 hours on it, which is pretty insanely low. And I like personally DSMC2 more because then you have that monitor without any cables and anything like that, and it's just a super modular design. The Dragon is also known to be kind of a dark sensor, and you also see it in my comparison to my Komodo or all other cameras basically, that the Dragon is always one step darker. So that's something you have to be aware of. So this sensor is really light hungry, but I feel like even when I've shot it, going up to ISO 2500 is totally fine for that sensor. Going over now onto Helium. Helium is an 8K Super 35 sensor. So this sensor in particular also has around 16 stops of dynamic range as the Dragon has. And it is, from my experience when I've shot with it, I think it's a very sharp sensor. So everything looks really clean, really sharp. So it's the most sharp sensor I think RED has ever made. It's a great sensor, don't get me wrong. If you like this kind of look, then obviously go for it. And the Helium you can also get around for, I think, like, also depends on the condition, everything like that. But I think around to 5 grand you can get a pretty decent kit. So then coming up to Gemini, and Gemini is a very very famous sensor because it's the only sensor Red ever made that has a dual native ISO. So this camera is really great for low light. It has a 5K sensor going up to 75 frames in its full format. It also has 16 stops of dynamic range. And this camera is pretty hard to get because it's very famous, as I've just said. So you can get a model around like 8 to maybe sometimes 12,000. I think like the Gemini also has a very clean sensor. It's not as sharp as the Helium, but definitely more on the cleaner side as, for example, Dragon. And you lose a stop, or even I think 1.5 stops if you go to the upper base ISO, which is 3200. But yeah, I think in these scenarios you even like the 14 stops dynamic range, which the camera still has, is more than enough. But now let's come to a real full frame competitor, which is the Red Monstro. That one has even a VistaVision sensor, so slightly wider than full frame. It shoots 8K up to 60 frames per second, and it's considered to have like 17 stops of dynamic range. So Monstro is a very clean, very great sensor. It has that large format look. I think it's a great sensor, and yeah, this is also a really great one, and I love personally also how the Red Monstro looks. But this camera is also still very demanded in the market, so it also depends on where you get it from, but you can get a kit from 8,000 to 12,000, something like that. Also depends on how many hours the camera has on it. Now let's come to the DSMC3 models, and here I have to give a very big shout out to the Red Komodo. I immediately picked one up when it came out, and mine has now over 1,000 hours on it. So also talking about like reliability on these cameras, I never ever had an issue either on that camera or also on this one. They just kept on working flawlessly. I've shot the entire Hans Zimmer shooting on the Komodo and many other jobs in like hot desert, cold environment. Everything was there, so this camera never ever let me down. I will say that I really like the Komodo. It still looks, compared to the Dragon, a little bit cleaner. It's a more like a modern sensor design, as I've just said, whereas the Dragon is, for me, like, it has a very nice texture in the image due to the noise profile and something like that. So personally, I really like the Dragon, and this body design is also a proper A-cam for me, because it has the multiple inputs and everything is just there. Here on the Komodo, it's really good if you want to rig it somewhere. It has a global shutter and anything like that. Like, the biggest complaint of this camera is like the frame rates. It shoots 6K up to 30 frames per second. For me personally, that was never an issue. This one has also a Ring Red set 16 stops of dynamic range, but I've seen like 1.5 or 2 stops difference to the Dragon, so it will be more realistically around 14 stops of dynamic range, which is still plenty enough, and also considering that this is a global shutter sensor, and you can pick those up even like, I think, $3,000 for one right now. It's new, which is actually pretty ridiculous. And also on the used market, they don't go as low because they're still very demanded, and yeah, I really love that camera. Also, Komodo X is really great. It has even 1 stop more of dynamic range, and also doubles everything in the high frame rate. So if you want to have 6K or at 80 frames per second, then the Komodo X is definitely for you. Personally, I would still go for the Komodo, but if you want to have just one camera, then the Komodo X obviously is the better one, but is obviously more expensive. So then we coming into the Raptor design. These ones are in the VistaVision. There's also Raptor Super 35, which is an 8K Super 35 sensor. Then the Red Raptor is an outstanding camera. The 8K at up to 100 frames per second is just insane at that format, and also the high dynamic range and everything. It's still on the cleaner side, and personally for me 8K resolution is just too much. So for me 6K is the absolute sweet spot, because that's also one thing why I went with the Dragon. So all in all, I think all these cameras are great to choose, but especially these older red cameras, as I've just said, from DSMC2, they are now very competitive in the price, and picking one of these cameras up could be a really nice deal. Depending on your liking, you may want to choose one over the other sensors, as I've just said. But personally for me, I think the Dragon sensor is one of the best. For me, my second choice would be the Gemini, because it's a very versatile sensor. And then my third choice would have been probably Monstro for DSMC2. As I've just said, Gemini Helium was not my type of sensor. It looked very clinical, really sharp, so didn't like it too much, but especially Dragon and also Gemini is a really, really nice one. So let me know in the comments below, what are your thoughts? What cameras did you shoot on, or are you planning to get one? Just let me know in the comments below, and I'm happy to help, and see you in my very next one. Cheers!